Let's be enjoying it. Come a fortnight.
The Lighthouse is one of these movies that, after watching it for the first time, it left me a bit dumbfounded. What on earth did I just watch? Is there any meaning behind this, or is it like the ramblings of a Lovecraftian character left mad by the cosmic and inexplicable horror inherited by his reality? Insanity, power, existential dread, and the supernatural are all themes of this magnificent film. But what impresses me the most is how neatly and well it encapsulates and sticks to multiple ideas and philosophies. More specifically, I'm talking about the philosophy of Nietzsche, the cosmic horror of H.P Lovecraft, the eerie correlation with Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, and last but not least, it is also associated commonly with the ancient Greek myth of Prometheus. The Lighthouse is directed by Robert Eggers. The film follows two lighthouse keepers, Thomas Wake, played by Willem Dafoe, and Ephraim Winslow, played by Robert Pattinson, a younger, reserved newcomer, as they endure an isolated 4-week shift on a remote island off the New England coast in the late 19th century. Ephraim Winslow arrives on the island as a subordinate to Thomas Wake, a seasoned lighthouse keeper who is harsh, superstitious, and fiercely protective of the beacon itself. Wake gives Winslow the most grueling tasks, hauling coal, cleaning chambers, maintaining the cistern, among others, and keeps the beacon all to himself, obsessively tending to it and forbidding Winslow from going near it. This only piques Winslow's curiosity with the beacon and the secrets it may hide. Early on, we can see some weird hallucinations and dreams of Winslow. A mermaid, a dead sailor, and weird octopus thing. Really, that's what I wrote down. From the very start, the influence on the horror and atmosphere, along with the mystery of the movie, is undoubtedly reminiscent and pretty much safe to say Lovecraftian. In The Call of Cthulhu, the book starts out with artists, poets, and other sensitive individuals experiencing weird visions and dreams, much like our main character in the novel. There's a cult of people who worship a stone bust of Cthulhu, just as Wake, the senior, worships the light of the beacon. Not only that, but Wake is also very superstitious and indulgent of tall tales.
Bad luck to kill a seabird.
More tall tales.
I also believe that Nietzsche's philosophy plays the most significant role in the actions and behaviors that shape our characters in The Lighthouse. Winslow's dynamic is one that fiercely represents Nietzsche's Übermensch and Untermensch concept, that is, the master and slave mind and how they intertwine with each other. Wake, despite being physically weaker, commands his will over Winslow, putting him through hard and physically demanding tasks, while he gets to keep to the light all by himself. This conflict establishes Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch and the master-slave morality. The Übermensch, or master, is someone who is able to break free from society's established values and create a personal moral system. Nietzsche believed that traditional values were life-denying, shaped by a slave morality rooted in guilt and fear of punishment. Instead, the Übermensch embodies life-affirming values, celebrating power, creativity, and joy in existence. This creative freedom is essential, as the Übermensch defines good and bad based on personal experience, strength, and vision, not on external authority or dogma. Wake himself does not respect the rules imposed by the establishment he works under. He drinks on the job despite being prohibited to, leaves off the hard duties to Winslow, and doesn't allow him to keep to the light, despite there being a clear regulation that they are supposed to switch regularly in this duty. But in all fairness to him, being a lighthouse keeper is not an easy job. It's not like he could get checked up on regularly by his superiors. Therefore, he holds the power. Even when a new keeper comes to assist him, he will violate these rules anyway, because he keeps all the logbooks and can write down anything to compromise the other person, ending up in them losing their job or their pay getting cut, which is exactly what he does to Winslow later on. For a master, good is synonymous with traits that reflect vitality, assertiveness, and a zest for life, while bad is associated confronted with weakness and dependence. On the other side of the spectrum, however, we have Winslow, who represents the Untermensch, or slave morality. He is dominated mentally and physically by Wake. Throughout the film, he grows a resentment and anger at him, while trying to remain cordial with him, as he is dependent on him, not cutting his pay or firing him. Just as the slave operates in society according to Nietzsche, Winslow has constant dreams and visions like before, having sexual fantasies with a mermaid, among others. He's physically, mentally, and sexually frustrated, a slave to Wake into his conditions. Something that I quickly have to mention is the fact that I believe that Nietzsche's philosophy is a bit off the rails to a certain extent. And in this movie, it is definitely taken to the extreme. Keep in mind that Nietzsche was a guy who was addicted to various substances that I can't mention in this video, and was just high off his mind writing some of this stuff. So don't come at me, man. As Winslow spends weeks in oppressive isolation, his mental state deteriorates, trapped on a desolate rock with only Wake, who constantly belittles and commands him. This isolation becomes his abyss, an endless space where he cannot escape his own thoughts or the haunting visions of his past. Nietzsche's concept of the abyss reflects this encounter with one's deepest, often terrifying aspects of the self. Winslow's prolonged solitude and inability to avoid his psychological turmoil illustrates how the abyss within him is beginning to gaze back, intensifying his madness. Winslow's prolonged loneliness and silence lead him to hallucinate disturbing visions, and he begins to lose touch with reality, constantly trying to decode the meaning behind Wake's actions. Subsequently, the story escalates when, out of this frustration, Winslow kills one of the seagulls that have been pestering him. According to Wake, seabirds possess the souls of sailors who died at sea, and therefore killing a seabird is bad luck. The consequences of this sudden impulse are felt when a terrible, seemingly never-ending storm begins affecting their food rations and water supply, only plunging them deeper into madness as days, maybe even weeks pass. Through what Nietzsche calls the will to power, Winslow begins a journey of overcoming and assertion in this period of time. But as the men get drunker and plunge even more into madness, they start revealing more about themselves to each other. Winslow, that his name isn't actually Winslow but Tom Howard, and Wake, that his Christian name is Tom, among other stories. This is when a sort of shift in the Übermensch status of Wake starts. They end up becoming more cordial than ever before. In his isolation and paranoia, he begins doubting his own authority, feeling that Winslow will overpower him, becoming resentful and controlling in ways that mirror slave morality. Nietzsche believed that humans aren't driven by states of consciousness such as happiness or unhappiness. He believed instead that humans are driven by the will to power. Let me explain. At its core, the will to power is the desire not to just survive but to thrive and transcend one's current state. Nietzsche believed that this drive fuels creativity, ambition, and the desire to improve oneself. Self-overcoming means that the individual is in a constant process of evolving and rising above personal limitations. This drive involves pushing beyond comfort zones, questioning established beliefs, and challenging one's own limitations in order to grow stronger and achieve a more authentic self. Winslow is driven to the beacon of the lighthouse. However, he holds the belief that the key to achieving all his desires is through it, fulfilling his sexual fantasies, letting go of his troubled past, and asserting dominance over his superior. He doesn't pursue this goal out of the purpose of becoming a better man, but rather out of greed and resentment, just as the slave would. This is where the individual ultimately gets consumed by the will to power. Nietzsche valued struggle and overcoming, but he also warned against becoming enslaved by endless striving. When someone is constantly driven by an insatiable will to power, they lose the ability to appreciate life's quieter moments and may ultimately find themselves incapable of satisfaction, feeling perpetually restless or inadequate. Winslow is sent over the tipping point now. He starts screaming at Wake and belittling him after finding out he cut his pay, and accused him of being drunk on duty despite him being as well. Furthermore, Wake got him drunk so he could miss his ship back on purpose. So when Wake even tries to snap back at him, Winslow just starts beating him up, making him bark and then trying to bury him alive. He manages to crawl his way out of the hole he had been dug in a couple minutes later and attempts to kill Winslow, but he fails miserably, and now the one who went from the slave to the Übermensch does not hesitate to retaliate. He who fights with monsters should be careful, lest he thereby become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into an abyss, the abyss will gaze back into you. Winslow finally snatches the keys to the beacon of the lighthouse. He can now attain the power and desires he's been longing for the entire film. Nietzsche warned of the dangers of gazing into the abyss, suggesting that too much confrontation with life's greatest challenges could lead to madness or an existential void. If the will to power drives someone to confront increasingly abstract or unreachable ideals, they may fall into despair or self-destruction, overwhelmed by the scale of their ambitions. By aiming for absolute greatness without limits, one can destroy themselves in the process, burning out or collapsing under the weight of unattainable goals. In the last shot, Winslow lies naked on the rocky shore, with seagulls pecking at his exposed intestines. This haunting image directly references Prometheus, who in Greek mythology was condemned to eternal torment by having his liver eaten by an eagle each day. Winslow's fate mirrors Prometheus' punishment, symbolizing that his quest to possess or understand the light, a stand-in for divine knowledge, has left him vulnerable and destroyed. The seagulls, which Wake warned Winslow not to harm, return as agents of his punishment, pecking at his body in a scene of cosmic retribution, or once hero consumed by the abyss he wished to comprehend.